we're gonna start with our first panel. So I would like to welcome Doris Sanner, who is the Chief Academic Officer for the for Aid to Education, and to Jani Ursin, who is the Research Director of the Finnish Institute for Educational Research. And the idea is that they will share precisely their work, how they define critical thinking, and what is the experience of what they have been achieving in Finland, for example. Thank you so much.
Buenos dias. And thank you for having us. It's a wonderful event. Marco and I have been talking about this for almost a year, yeah, see? So it's finally happened, and thank you to everybody for hosting and all the hard work that the team at Tech has put forth, and to our presenters and our panelists. We have a very full day today. I'm going to talk, this is the theory of the day. Much of the rest of the day will be application, so you're going to be listening to a little bit about the research that we do at CAE and the results of these studies. So these are just some reflections on the research. So a little bit about CAE. We are a nonprofit organization, and we specialize in performance-based assessments of critical thinking. And we have been around for over 20 years. Originally part of the RAND Corporation, if you know the large think tank that is based out of Santa Monica in California. The critical thinking aspect of it became so successful within RAND that we spun off as an independent nonprofit back in 2005, I believe. And I joined CAE in 2011, and this year is my 15th year with the organization. So just some of our partners, and we have Jani Ursin from Finland, and he has been the national program manager. We've been working together since 2012, back when the OECD had the AHALO project, of which University of Guadalajara was a country representative part of that study. So I'm going to talk a little bit about why critical thinking, why is it so important, especially now with the rise of generative AI. And this is why, I actually should stand a little bit this way so I can see. So these skills are not just important for being in school, your time at your university. It's important for life. So these are future skills for workplace readiness, for problem solving, innovation, informed and engaged citizenship. That's a big one. Critical thinking is really essential for that. And lifelong learning. So it's not just about being in the classroom and getting good grades and graduating from a university program. It's basically a lifelong skill. These are data that I'm about to show you, both research that we do at CAE as well as other research out there about this. Employers want these skills. So when students have graduated from higher education and they're entering into the workforce, what they're finding, the research is showing that the employers want these skills of critical thinking, problem solving, effective communication, and yet there's a gap because the students have good grade point averages and they know content area, but they may not necessarily have these higher order transferable skills that will help them succeed at their jobs. This is data, actually, that colleagues from Texas A&M and I published in DIDAC, which is Iberoamericana's journal. This was just published this year, showing that the students themselves find critical thinking to be important for both workplace as well as academic success. We also show, this is a research study that was published in a report that the OECD sponsored, showing that these skills are predictive of success in both higher education as measured by grade point average, as well as post-university workplace success. So employment, full-time employment, salary, graduate school enrollment, and then also reflections and feedback from hiring managers and graduate student advisors. So we know that these skills are important, and they end up being important for the workplace and for the future. So they also are associated with higher earning. So this is research that was done in 2020 and 2013, not just with CAE, but within the United States. Better skills means better outcomes professionally. And this is the data that I'm referring to from the OECD. So this project was 10 years of data, starting from 2013 all the way through 2022, when this report was published. And this is an international data set that has 7 countries and CLA scores, collegiate learning assessment, and I'll talk a little bit more about the assessment in a bit, but these are critical thinking skills by levels of mastery of entering and exiting university students, about 120,000 in this data set. And as you can see, 57% of students entering higher education globally in our sample are not proficient in critical thinking. So I don't think that number is shocking for those of us in the room who have seen undergraduate students coming in. They're not proficient. And what I think is even more shocking is that by the time they graduate, so our exiting students, 47% of them are still not proficient in critical thinking. So they're graduating with 3.8 grade point average out of 4 points, which is what we use in the United States. So they are doing very well in terms of their grades in school. However, they aren't able to think critically, problem solve, and communicate effectively. And so this is the disconnect that you're hearing from the workplace and the workforce, that universities are graduating students with high grades, and yet they don't have these essential skills that they are needed in order to be successful in the workplace and in life. And yes, you do see an increase in proficiency, but that increase is, in my opinion, not large enough. We shouldn't have 47% of students graduating not proficient in critical thinking. So critical thinking has become even more important because of generative AI. As I mentioned, CAE has been around for a long time, over 20 years. And we've been doing the same critical thinking. This is our expertise, performance-based assessments of critical thinking. And now everyone is starting to really, really think about critical thinking. You'll see this in the media and the news, because generative AI has basically, in some ways, if it's used incorrectly, replaced students' thinking. And so this is indispensable now for AI because of evaluating AI output, prompt interaction, problem solving beyond automation, digital amnesia, cognitive offloading. Last night at dinner, somebody told me, it's not just cognitive offloading, it's cognitive surrender, that term, right? Students are completely, I think, Claudia, you were the one that told me last night, cognitive surrender, which was a term that I had not heard, scary. And so critical thinking is really important, now more so than ever, because the fact that AI is here, we can't ignore it. We have to be able to embrace it and learn how to teach our students to use it effectively, ethically, in a way to think, be thoughtful about it, because it's a tool, just like every other tool that first came in. When calculators first came on the market all those years ago, people thought this is going to be the end of math. Students aren't going to be thinking it's a tool, so we have to teach students. And the faculty have to learn how to use AI in the classroom. Some of the faculty that I've worked with are just blinders over the eyes. We're going to go back to Blue Books and not use it and ban it from the classroom. But that's not reality, because once the students leave the classroom, it exists. So isn't it our responsibility to be thoughtful about how we teach students to use AI effectively and to think critically about this? So we're going to have discussions about AI throughout the day. And then AI negative impact. These are all the things that are bad. We know this. We see this in the news. But there are also positive ways in which AI can help us. So, for example, it can enhance student learning. Quick feedback. It aggregates information so quickly and can give you information. That could be a good thing or a bad thing, depending on how you use this. And this is one of the CADIs that we did, which was about how to teach students to be effective and think critically about the output for AI. It allows us to look at alternative perspectives. Students may be very fixated on one solution, and AI can help think about different ways. Identifying tools for weaknesses in their reasoning and their writing. Weaknesses, and maybe I didn't notice that I wrote in passive voice, and AI told me, well, you use passive voice very often. This is a way you can enhance your writing by becoming more active. And then finally, practicing and defending ideas. So you can use this as a tool, and there are positive ways to think about AI. So this is a little bit about the program. We've talked about critical thinking. You've heard Marco talk about this. And this is a holistic program. It starts with professional development, and it's working with faculty on helping them understand that critical thinking is something that they need to deliberately teach and outline in a course. So when I work with faculty, I ask how many people think, actually I can ask now, how many people think critical thinking is important as a skill? Just a raise of hands, right? Most everybody. And how many of you deliberately teach it in your classrooms? Yes, all the workshop people that are here. I would expect that from the front. But when I do this in a workshop for the first time for people who haven't done this, the workshop numbers, faculty drop. Everyone thinks they teach it, and they intend to, and that's the intention. But the reality is that it's not deliberately done, and it's also not part of a course grade and not measured, and so therefore it kind of just falls on the wayside. And everyone thinks and has the intention of increasing these skills, but the reality is it doesn't happen through osmosis. So you have to be very deliberate and intentional about it. So that's the first step. Then we do the assessment piece, which is the CLA. You've heard about that. That is a performance-based assessment of critical thinking. And this is a way to get information about your students and their skills to show where they are, how much information do they have, how much information you can get about their critical thinking skills. We then have the faculty deliver the classroom activities, which you'll hear about later in the 2 panels from now. We have 5 faculty members who will be showing and showcasing the work that they've done in the classroom, working with the students, which is really like the most exciting piece, I think. Way more exciting than this lecture that I'm giving. Then we have deliberate practice opportunities for performance tasks, and then finally we reassess to see whether there are learning gains and looking at the efficacy of the program. So this is a holistic program. Many institutions do step 2, and that's where they stop. They get the information, and they're like, okay, well, we have this information, and the other steps are the hard work. It's really hard to change faculty. Try going in as me. I go into a classroom and I try to tell a room of 45 PhDs that they have to do better. So it can be hostile when I enter the room. But by the end of the workshop, hopefully I will have at least been able to convince some, if not most, that this work is important. Because even though I have a doctorate from a school of education, I was actually never taught how to teach. I was taught by learning by my professors. I teach statistics now. I spent my entire doctoral studies watching the back of his head while he was at the board, writing formulas. And that's how I taught to teach, and at some point I realized that's not good, right? So no, it's not good. Memorizing formulas is not a good way to think about statistics and data. So after I started at CAE, I really changed my own way of teaching in the classroom. And a lot of that is reflected in the workshops that we have at CAE. So as I said, these are the different parts of the program. Most are looking at performance assessments and reports and insights, which are the right-hand 2. But the left-hand 2, which are the workshops and the materials, that's essential for increasing critical thinking. And faculty will say, oh, we don't have time for this. My semester is already packed. It's really, really, right? Like, yes, I'm seeing the faculty members agree. But many of you already have activities and cases you're using in the classroom now. And it's just a matter of adapting this framework for critical thinking, to put it on top, to think about critical thinking in addition to, not in place of content. So what does CLA measure? This is our framework for critical thinking and communication. And if I were to get a room of 100 people and ask them their definition of critical thinking, I would get 100 different versions of it. So there's no way in which we can measure all of critical thinking. We have a very specific operationalized definition of critical thinking under data literacy, critical reading and evaluation, and critiquing and argument. If any of you here are familiar with the bar exam in the US, which is the legal exam, this is similar to that in that it is a way of asking students to perform, to make a decision and back up their decision with evidence. And then that's the communication aspect of it. So the person who originally founded CLA and designed this was the person who originally designed the written part of the bar exam, and when he was at Rand. So what's unique about our assessment is that it's not purely multiple choice. We present students with a real world problem that they might encounter. It is considered to be domain agnostic. What that means is that any student from any field of study can do well on the assessment. It does not measure content. There is reading and there is some math in it, but those are all developed to be below grade level. So if you are a university student, we're looking at middle school and early high school level reading and math, because it's not a measure of numeracy and literacy, it's a measure of critical thinking. And so they're presented with a real world scenario And there's not a single correct answer, which can be frustrating for students because they want the right answer. They want one answer that's right. And what this is showing them that in the real world there isn't always necessarily one right answer. We want to know what you think the best answer is or what you recommend and back up that decision with evidence that you're presented with. So that's how the assessment works. There's not a single correct answer. And then the students themselves receive information in their reports. So every student who takes the CLA gets a report. The report tells them where they are, how they compare within their university, how they compare within their country, and we even have an international database for comparisons. And they also show their levels of mastery, so whether they're proficient or beyond or not proficient yet, and ways in which they can improve. So this can be done in a way that actually, yesterday we were talking about this, Raphael, when I was part of the doctoral student forum, we were talking about formative assessment. So this is a way in which we can use reports formatively for students to see where they are and for professors to use these reports to help them improve their skills. The reports are also, data are aggregated up to institutional level. So anyone who here is at the institution, you've received a report that looks similar to this, which has your aggregated student results and then comparison within other institutions within your country, internationally, and we also provide value added, which is learning gains, student learning gain measure. And then the last thing I want to talk about are the results of the studies that we have done from the workshops. So this is one that was very early on with Texas A&M, the first study that we did, an efficacy study. This was a study where there were 4 professors, 2 were really, really into wanting to do this workshop and including critical thinking, and 2 were like, no way, I don't have any time. And the students self-selected into the 4 sections of the course, and those who had the instruction did better significantly than those who did not. And this is from 1 semester. Another study that we just looked at, and this is actually from, we have Michael Alexander here, who's one of the deans from Mays Business School. This is his class instruction. This is the data from his program, where this is not longitudinal, but over several years, including a COVID year in here, which they didn't test, but no instruction condition where nobody had any kind of critical thinking. And this is a case in which, if you see here, 34% of MBA students at a top business school in the United States are still not proficient. So yeah, they're better than the norming sample that we have, including all universities of graduating students, but 34% of them are still not showing proficiency at an MBA program. With very little intervention, with the implicit instruction condition, where they were just given the framework to work from, you see a dramatic increase in terms of the proficiency level. The non-proficient group dropped from 34% to 13%, and that's just from implementing frameworks. And then the last condition with the explicit instruction, which Mike will show us later, where the students are engaged in the classroom, they have pedagogy, practice, etc. You see remarkable increase in their accomplished and advanced category. And virtually nobody is in that last category. So we see that this is helpful and it works. So thank you very much. And we'll take questions at the end after Yanni has presented. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Doris. Now, Yanni, please share with us what you're doing.
Okay, I skip this one. Okay, good morning, dear colleagues, or should I say good evening, because I guess it's 8 p.m. in Finland, so it's later on there, but I think I will survive, don't worry. So what I'm planning to tell you today is probably a little bit different perspective than what the most of the talks that we hear today are, because I'm not talking from the point of view of individual institution, but I'm more talking about at the system level, so the experiences that we've had in Finland in terms of measuring the generic skills. And when I say generic skills, I mean exactly the same skills as Doris already presented, so critical thinking, problem solving, and written communication skills, because we've been utilizing the CLA Plus instrument for many, many years now in Finland. So, but before I go into detail, just a few words about the Finnish education system. I'm pretty sure that you're not very familiar with the Finnish higher education system, or education system in general. And we have to remember that Finland is a very small country. We have a total population around 5.6 million, which I think it's around the same amount of people that's living here in Monterrey, if I'm right. So you can imagine that's the whole country. Meaning that our higher education system also is very small. At the moment, we have 38 higher education institutions. And the sort of baseline for Finnish education system is that we have sort of two different strands. We have a sort of general one, which it's like Bildung, the term that Germans use. It offers this broad knowledge, critical thinking, and preparation for the future studies. And then we have the vocational sort of pathway, which offers more sort of skills. And this is also reflected in the higher education system in Finland, because we have two different types of higher education institutions. We have these traditional research-intensive universities, and then we have the universities of applied sciences, which are more professionally oriented institutions. But what's important to remember in our education system as a whole, we don't have any dead ends. I mean, you can do a vocational training, but you can end up having a PhD in medicine, for example. So it's a very flexible system that we have in Finland. The total number of students in higher education institutions is about 3,400, which, as you can see, it's very little. But our system is mainly publicly funded, so the funding comes from the government. The annual budget is about 3 billion euros for all the institutions. So that's to give you the background. Then only a few words about why we are measuring the generic skills in Finland. Doris also already mentioned about why it's important in general, but in Finland especially, our government and also the European Commission in general in Europe has been highlighting the importance of generic skills in line with the professional skills. So we need to have these transferable skills in order to better to do in the working life and in life in general. And this is something that our government also has valued greatly. And this is why they funded two projects, what we call INCAPPAS. The first one was 2018 and 2021, and the second one was ended just, well, it's ending next week, where we have the final seminar of this CAPPAS 2 project. But you can see that in total we've tested something like 5,000, is it 700? Yeah. Students in these two projects, which is quite a good number of students to be tested. But these three, we had these three research questions in Finland. The first one, we wanted to know what is the level of generic skills in Finland in terms of the skills that we measured. The second one is we were keen on to know what are the background factors that explain the variation in the mastery of the generic skills. And the third one, and which is something that we really focus now on this second project, is do these skills develop during the higher education studies, and if so, how extensively? This is just to show you that this has been quite complex undertaking. We had many institutions participating in this project. We had a national steering committee, which was very useful and helpful for us. We had two universities who carried out this project in collaboration with CAE, and then, of course, all the institutional coordinators and so on. So there was lots of things to coordinate it in these projects. And here you can see the number of institutions that participated in the second round of the project. So we had majority of the institutions were the universities of applied sciences, but unfortunately we only had 5 universities participating. But in total, in both of these projects, all but one institution, university has participated in CAPPAS project, and also most of the universities of applied sciences. And you can see the two flags. I mean, some of the institutions are bilingual, so we need to always offer all the tests both in Finnish and Swedish, which are the official languages of Finland. Then Doris already presented the CLA Plus framework, but here are a few words about why we adopted the CLA+. The first thing is it's a performance-based assessment. We don't have that many performance-based assessments in higher education. So we were really keen on what students actually learn. We are not interested in about sort of self-reported surveys, which really doesn't offer reliable information. The second thing is the holistic approach. It requires a lot from a student to do the test. You have to use different kinds of cognitive abilities or skills in order to be able to answer to the test questions. And also the fact that it's suitable for all students. It doesn't matter what is your disciplinary background, so all the students can do it easily. And also what we've liked about is that, especially in the second round, it's been practically very feasible. I mean, all the systems that you provided for us from CLA has been very easy to use and user-friendly. So these are just a few of the benefits that we felt with this instrument. Okay, then a few words about the findings or the results. And what I'm presenting is from the second round of the study. And you are actually the first audience ever to hear these. Like I said, we will have the final report, final seminar next week, so nobody has heard about these findings yet. So I think what is important in this slide, and this is already something that Doris highlighted, if you look at the right-hand side, the developing and emerging, you can see that majority of the Finnish students are also struggling with the generic skills. It's pretty much in line with the OECD report. But there are differences between students coming from the universities and universities of applied sciences. And by entering, I mean first-year students, by exiting third-year students. So it's different, for example, in the system in the States. So in the universities, you can see that there are much less exiting students among those who are struggling with the generic skills. But if you look at those students coming from the universities of applied sciences, there's still surprisingly high number of students struggling with generic skills at the end of their undergraduate studies. And this finding was a little bit different to the first round of project that we had, but still the big picture is clear. Also, the Finnish students are struggling with the generic skills, and even more so in the sector of the students coming from the universities of applied sciences. Then we were also able to compare our data set with the US counterparts, and we noticed that the university students in Finland are doing much better than the American counterparts. But then again, those students coming from the universities of applied sciences, the first-year students were pretty much on the same level as the US students, but the US students outperformed those students coming from the universities of applied sciences when they were on their third year of studies. And in the US, it was fourth year. Okay, I will skip this one. And then we asked quite a lot of all kinds of background questions in the background survey. In here I just mentioned few, and I will only highlight the most important ones in my presentation. So in Finland, we don't do testing in general. Testing is something that students are not used to do. We only have one standardized test in Finland, and it is the matriculation examination, which is the final year of senior high school. And not all the students go to senior high school, meaning that not all the students do this test. But if you look at the matriculation examination, the picture is quite clear. I mean, those students who did the matriculation examination did much better in the test, so their generic skills were much higher than those students who had not done the matriculation examination. It does make sense because the senior high school in Finland is really about providing students with the skills and competencies for the future studies, especially the critical thinking and problem solving. So partly this tells that our system works. I mean, those who are in the senior high school, they get the abilities and skills that they need. But then we also look, because in the matriculation examination test you do various subjects, but the most important ones was the native language or mother tongue. So it's either you do the test in Finnish or Swedish. And the picture again was very clear. Those who had the best grades in the native language test, they also had very high level of generic skills as measured by our study. But then parental education didn't matter at all, which is quite interesting actually. So the only difference was that those students whose parents had only at most basic level sort of differed from the rest of the group. But parental education wasn't important, which again partly justifies the sort of Finnish society where we tend to think that we are quite equal. And then this question, which I personally don't like, I found it to be quite awkward, but all of you who are familiar with, for example, PISA, the test that OECD runs for the 15 years old, they have the same question there too, and it's a sort of proxy for the cultural capital of the childhood home, and it also is quite important in explaining the differences or the variation. And you can see that the more books you have at your childhood home, the better your generic skills are. So this was also something that we observed already in KAPPAS 1, the first round. But then also we ask about how much effort did you put when you took the test. And this is super expensive, super important. Can be expensive as well. If you don't put effort, it might be expensive. So, but here you can see that the more you put effort, the better you performed. But also we looked at that among the total sample, you can see that those who really put the most effort, they really did much better than those who didn't. So this is really important, and it's not just about sort of feature of a test situation, but it's also feature of how you perform in life in general. So you need to invest, you just can't be a free rider, or you just cannot cope with doing nothing. So this means that it's also important to remember that student effort is also extremely important when we talk about developing these skills. It cannot be just done through very good teaching or intervention, but also students need to be willing to invest their energy and time to be able to develop these skills. So I think this is the main message from this slide. But then, and this was interesting and this is something new. We've never done anything like this in Finland, and we don't have much international studies about doing a sort of longitudinal or follow-up study about how these skills develop. And our sample, it wasn't very big because it wasn't that easy to get the students to take the test 2 times, but in any case, our sample is a little shy of 400 students, and they did the test for the first time during the first semester when they entered higher education, and then 2 years after that. And from this slide, you can see that there is a modest increase. So there seems to be some sort of development happening, but it's not very strong, it's not very extensive. But then again, it's also in line what we've known from the previous studies. So something positive is happening, but I think much more could be happening. But there are also individual variation quite a bit. And in CLA Plus, there are mastery levels, which I don't remember by heart, the English ones, but there are 5 mastery levels. And in this, we show you what happened with the mastery levels, and 0 means that the mastery level remained the same. And +1 meant that there was one increase of 1 mastery level, and +2 obviously that 2. And -1 means that there was decrease of 1 mastery level, and -2 that there were decrease of 2 mastery levels. So you can see that there are variation. Not all the students are progressing the same way, and even some students are decreasing these skills. We haven't had much time to investigate it that further, but it seems that also the effort or the motivation makes a difference, and the decrease is most likely explained by the lack of motivation for the second round of doing the test. But in any case, again, the big picture is that there's a variation. Not all the students are the same. Okay, we can say that in Finland, yeah, like I said, there are lots of students who are struggling with these generic skills, and something needs to be done, but what? And I know that this seminar or forum today is really about discussing about what to do exactly. So we have quite a few of recommendations, but I will just highlight two that are important in our national context. The first one is that we need to take into account the sort of development of generic skills throughout the whole educational trajectories. We cannot just focus on higher education, because as you saw, about 40% of Finnish students are struggling when they enter the higher education. So something needs to be done before they come to universities or higher education institutions in general. And that's why we are highlighting especially the fact that in the vocational stream, in the vocational pathway, you need to especially highlight these generic skills if we believe, like I said, our government believes, and if we believe that they are important skill, sort of in order to pursue a critical citizenships and so on. So we really need to focus also on these lower levels of education, not just on higher education. But having said that, like I said, we saw also that the skills doesn't seem to be developing greatly during the higher education studies. So also the higher education institutions need to put more effort and invest more effort in developing these skills. And what we've labeled is that we highlight that the institution should promote the skills that require, the promoting generic skills requires a pedagogically designed motivation support approach. And by motivation support approach, we really mean that it's something that students are motivated to learn. Because we do believe that these critical thinking and problem-solving skills are something that can be learned, they can be taught, they aren't just something that are there somewhere. And as Doris said, many teachers already, in their teaching, they have these ways of delivering teaching that promotes the critical thinking skills, but they're not that often transparent. They don't know them because they're not part of the goals, they're not part of the assessments and so on. So we are really encouraging teachers to take these more into account. And also, I think teachers need to be supported, they need to be trained. And most importantly, I think Rector already left, but is that the leaders of the universities are also supporting the development of generic skills. Highly important, because at least in Finland, if the deans, if not the rectors, are favoring these kind of approaches, nothing will happen. They don't have resources for developing these skills. Oh, this doesn't look right. But in any case, there are the big, we published quite a bit of papers in English, so I mean, these slides will be delivered to everybody, so you can see there. Okay, thank you. Gracias.
Well, thank you so much for this opening session. So what I would like to do, with any further ado, is to open the floor for comment, questions that you will have. So please feel free. Yeah. I'll give you. ¿Me
We
ayudas?
probably don't need all.
No, we don't need all.
They have there? Okay.
Hello. Since critical thinking assessment lacks a single correct answer, what specific criteria do you use to assure an objective and consistent evaluation across the students?
That's a great question. We have an extensive scoring program. So the student essays are all scored on a rubric, and there are 3 sub-skills. So there's analysis and problem solving, writing effectiveness, and written communication. Those student essays typically it's me that does the training. I train human scorers. So I was invited actually to go to Finland to train the scorers to score and finish, so Yanni's whole team. And they score every paper twice. And every time the papers are scored and there's a disagreement more than a certain number of points, it goes to another scorer to do resolution. And once that's done enough times that we have enough papers to be brought into a machine scoring, we then use machine scoring for the essays. So in Mexico and in the US, we have enough student essays to have automated essay scoring, which allows us to have student feedback quickly. And then in addition to that, I think it's 10%, a minimum of 10% are also double scored to ensure that there is consistency of the student, of the automated scoring engine, so that there's no drift or other things that happen. Yeah, so it's a lot of extensive training, and great question, thank you.
Can you hear me? Okay, one addition. There's one paper in the slide that we did with, my colleagues did about the reliability of the instrument, and in terms of whether the PT section and the selected response questions are sort of functioning as good. Both of them are functioning as well. So you can read the paper. I mean, it seems to be functioning pretty well, and the construct there is pretty consistent.
Thank you.
Okay. Gianni, question. Could you elaborate a little bit more why the big or apparently prominent differences between the results of the students at the universities and at the applied science? Is there factors that you identify that give those differences?
Yeah. That's a good question. The main reason is that the student population is very different. Those who enter universities, these research-intensive universities, comes through the most general stream. So they have the matriculation examination, they've done the senior high school. Whereas those students who enter the universities of applied sciences comes typically through the vocational sector. And that sort of explains that the vocational sector doesn't seem to be producing as strong generic skills as the general pathway. That's really the main reason. The student populations are very much different. And this has been something because we also deliver the institutional reports to every single institution that participate in this project. And then many of those institutions who are the universities, applied sciences, have been a little bit disappointed to learn that their students don't perform as well as those studying in the universities. And this has been quite, let's put it that they don't want to sort of understand that that's simply because of the student population is different, because this is very political and sensitive issues, because in Finland both type of institutions wants to be equal, but we still know that in practice they are not, and this is one of the examples of it.
Do you give feedback then to the vocational schools? I mean, the vocational schools that provide those students apparently can do a better job in terms of.
No, we don't provide them with direct feedback, but we had the sort of mid-seminar where we presented the preliminary findings of this CAPPAS 2 project in October, where Doris also participated. And we had a panel there where we had a representative from the vocational school sector. And it was quite refreshing to listen to her, because the way the vocational schools operate is very much different to, for example, the senior high schools. And that's why it is, because they have very strict sort of curriculums, how many hours they can teach whatever subject. And they were saying that, sorry to say, but we don't have any room for anything that we can promote the generic skills. And the second point is that our current minister of who is responsible for vocational sector, he's not interested at all in implementing critical thinking skills to that sector, because he feels that we need to provide students with practical skills so that they can enter working life as quickly as possible.
Isn't critical thinking a practical skill, though?
I want to follow up on the question because at least in Mexico, there is always when the PISA results come, one of the reference points is Finland, no? That Finland is having really a top performance on PISA, and you would expect, given that precisely the results on critical thinking sincerely would be better, and they are not. So I do not know if there has been an internal discussion of saying, well, what is going on? I mean, we have certain results in PISA that are not, it seems that they are not consistent with what we are obtaining on critical thinking scores.
Okay. Okay, now it's working. Okay, let's start by saying that obviously PISA is the flagship of all the projects that there is measuring the learning outcomes. And when the PISA results are published in Finland, it's always a huge event. Whereas when we published the Kappas 1 findings, nobody was interested in about those. So I mean that's and so I somehow we are measuring different things in Kappas project or with the CLA Plus than what they do with PISA. I'm not expert in PISA, although my colleagues are doing the PISA studies in Finland. But we are definitely measuring different things. But I agree with you. I was a little bit surprised when we had the first Kappas results that we didn't do any better. Because I also felt that our education system is somehow functioning well. But in terms of these skills, it's not, and this again is a lesson for the system, that if they really want to highlight the importance of the critical thinking and problem-solving skills, something needs to be done. But I'm still not sure if we want to do as a sort of system level.
Yanni, can you tell everybody what Kappas stands for and how you pronounce it?
Oh yeah, I guess that was why you were laughing when I saw the slide. I have to show the slide again because I don't remember that by heart myself either. So, does this go? Oh, I went, okay. I try to remember. It's korkeakoulu opiskelijoiden oppimistulosten arviointi Suomessa. That's very easy, isn't it?
And what does it stand for? Like
It is like the assessment of higher education students' learning outcomes in Finland. We used to work learning outcomes. It come from AHELO, which was the OECD's initiative for assessing the learning outcomes of higher education students.
I don't know if there's any. Yes, there are two questions, so I'll put them together first on the back, and then I'll give you the microphone. Give me 1 second. Pamela.
Who goes first? Me? Okay. Hi, thank you very much for this panel. I was thinking about how young people is consuming information right now, and even us, not so young people, through social media and technology in general, but with the mainstreaming of the AI use in a lot of our aspects of the common life, if critical thinking is at risk at some point, if we are losing some of the abilities to do or perform well in critical thinking, and if we need to rethink how we train for critical thinking in the light of technology, or if we can integrate technology to enhance our critical thinking.
Yes. Oh yeah, okay.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
Yanni, you talked about effort being a key variable, and you talked about motivation being key to learning. That seems disheartening, but it also seems like a set of possibilities that if we know what lever to pull, the lever of effort and the lever of motivation. The goal is not to get them to test well. The goal is to get them to learn the skills and take it into life. How do you see effort and motivation carrying forward beyond the test and into life? How do those variables matter? How do we help increase effort and increase motivation?
So, to answer a question about AI, I think you were at the second CADI, yes? And so I think it's the effort of using AI as a tool and understanding it's a tool. It shouldn't be used to replace thinking or for us to surrender our thinking and have AI do everything for us, but it's really important to learn how to use it effectively. So I teach statistics, as I mentioned, and this past semester was at NYU. It's the School of Public Policy there at Wagner School. And I asked my students, because I had just recently done the AI CADI, how many of you in the class, the students of about 50, have been taught how to use AI properly to help you with your work? And 2 students out of 50 raised their hands. And then I said, how many of you use AI in your work? Don't worry, you won't get in trouble. Everybody, almost everybody raised their hand. So that's the disconnect of everyone is using it, but nobody has the instruction to use it effectively, to use it ethically, to understand that you have to have citations if you're using it. You need to show where the information, just like if you were to cite a published author, if you're using AI to help you, you need to cite. So these are the skills that you have to learn. I think it's irresponsible of us as educators to just say, we can just ignore AI and it'll go away. That's not happening. So what we have to do is, with other tools, show students and faculty, how do we use this responsibly and how do we best leverage it as a tool, because it's really good at aggregating information really quickly and getting information that you might want to need that it may take you hours and hours to research, but you can have that. But then to think critically about the results. Sure.
Okay, that's very good and difficult questions. Probably I don't have any rational answer to that. But in terms of effort, I mean, our colleague just published a paper about learning and grit. I guess that's the right word. And in Finland we have this sisu, it's like grit, essentially. And it's really about that. Also, students really need to know that learning isn't always fun. It cannot be. I mean, it's demanding as well. So you really need to invest on learning. But then motivation is a little bit different. I mean, I think the example Doris gave about during the undergraduate studies, the teacher in statistics was just showing the back of his head and writing on I had the same experience. So, I mean, you can try to find motivating ways of delivering teaching so that students are sort of engaged with the situation. So that's probably the best way to do it. But how to do that? Practice is, of course, again, the challenging question.
I just want to retake my question because, I mean, it's key for us as faculty and for our leaders to help us train better precisely for getting that motivation. I mean, if motivation is one of the factors associated to have these better learning outcomes, one of the key discussions is how are we going to train professors to be better motivators of their students. When we were having, and some of my colleagues are here, our internal workshop at the School of Social Sciences, sincerely there was a debate, remember? Because some of our faculty, I mean, sincerely I got exasperated. Because this idea, our students are like this. It's because that student is not like that. I said, one of them, I mean, well, you are the faculty member. We are hired to change that. I mean, we are the ones that we need to motivate them. We need to provoke them. I mean, if not, we are not in the correct job. And I can understand that many of us do not know how to do it, and that's why we need to have better quality training sessions. But precisely, if the research is showing that motivation is one key element then we need to demand our leaders, and that's why we have a lot of our leaders here, is that help us become better trained so we have better results in the learning experience of our students.
Just quick follow-up before we finish. I mean, in Finland, that isn't that easy in practice because, I mean, sometimes you find a really nice way of delivering your teaching, which is really motivating, and some students enjoy that. But there's always a group of students who goes to the teen office and say that that's too demanding. He's demanding too much given the workload of the course. And that's the problem. I mean, because the student population, of course, is different. Not all of them are so happy about if you're starting delivering something new and something novel and something very motivating.
Can you help me with the microphone to be more?
Yeah, I was like thinking about these ideas of effort and motivation, but here in Mexico maybe we are like confused about those ideas because here when we say motivation, maybe it's to say students it's everything okay, you can do it well at the exam or something like that. But what I'm hearing, maybe motivation is how to construct specific learning experiences that maybe are demanding, but are making clear to them that critical thinking is important, and maybe you can clarify those things. And what you understand by effort, because I have a personal like critical about this idea of students here in Mexico that I put the best effort I could, but the result is not good. What kind of idea you have or how you implement it in Finland?
To the last question, I don't have any sort of practical solution for that. We haven't implemented properly anything, but then again, it's about teaching, of course. I mean, if students say that despite my best effort, I didn't do well, then it means that you have to do something differently in the teaching in order to be able to help the student. But of course, the motivation in general is something different than the sort of student satisfaction surveys, that whether you are satisfied with the teaching or whether you are satisfied with the whatever, it is something that goes much beyond to that. So you really need to find ways of getting students motivated. And I think this also goes beyond the formal or informal learning environments. It's something that's important in life in general, that you are motivated on what you do. And that's important skill per se. But just one final comment. I think we have to highlight the fact that the CLA Plus and the background questions that we have, they don't specifically measure motivation. It's more about effort and engagement, but we use the term motivation because it's also important. We know that from other studies as well.
Well, okay, let's do the last two questions because we need to close, take a break, and then come to the next panel. So very briefly. Go ahead. Carla, they have the no, that's why 1 and 2. Yeah.
Good morning. I was just thinking what you just said, and I'm wondering how much it differs or how much it matters what's the environment, because in motivation it can be internal and external, and oftentimes the external motivation is very important. Who is in the classroom? And if I see that my peers try to do better, then it motivates many students. How much do you think it matters in Finland, or in your case, or in the different schooling system? How do you see that? Because I see that makes a big difference for student outcome.
Claudia.
Yes, it's a question for both of you, for Doris and for Gianni. I'm very curious about how you arrived at your definition of what critical thinking is, at your working definition for critical thinking. And especially because of your comment, Gianni, about the difference in the results from the PISA, and you're measuring different things. And as you said, Doris, every person you ask what they mean by critical thinking probably has their own definition. So I'm just curious about how you arrived at your working definition to start measuring it.
Mine is actually pretty simple. I don't know the exact details of how the definition and the construct was created because it was before I started, but I do know that they convened. it was a foundation funding for this idea of developing a performance-based assessment for critical thinking, and they convened, I want to say, like 50 experts to come together to operationalize this idea, and based upon the experience of what the bar exam was. So they went out and they brought in all the people who were experts on critical thinking, put together the construct, sent it out, had people in the community verify, and that was it. Because it's impossible to measure all of critical thinking. So you have to operationalize it in a way that's measurable in a performance assessment, and this is where we ended.
And if I answer to you, I mean, I just fully agree. I mean, Finland is no different from many other countries. The students are very much different whether they are pursuing the internal motivation or external. And just to give sort of example in terms of this test is that the biggest challenge was to get the students to take the test. And we try to motivate them differently. And really the best ones are these internal ones. In that regard, it's obviously different to motivation, but typically the internal ones are more effective than the external ones. Although the external motivation and motives are also very important, so it's a very complex and difficult to say, but we are not different from any other countries.
Well, thank you so much for this first round of reflections, and thanks so much for your participation. Let's take a small break of 10 minutes, and we will come back for the next panel. Thank you so much.